When is the absolute best day to plant a seed? I know it sounds almost too simple, right? But the answer to that question can literally transform farming on a global scale. So today, we're going to dig into this really fascinating experiment with soybeans on a new agricultural frontier, all to find the answer.
So to really get why this matters so much, you have to understand the scale we're talking about. Get this, 45.1 million hectares. That's the staggering amount of land Brazil planted with soybeans just for the 2023-2024 season. I mean, it's a massive operation, and even the tiniest improvements can have a huge global impact.
All right, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll head to Brazil's new soybean frontier. Then, we'll dive into the brilliant experiment they set up to get some answers. We'll ask the big question, does sowing time really make a difference? We'll reveal the champion seeds, and finally, we'll connect the dots and see why smarter farming in just one region means bigger harvests for all of us.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story takes place in the state of Maranhão. It's part of Brazil's new and rapidly expanding agricultural frontier. For the farmers here, the rulebook just hasn't been written yet. They're facing this huge challenge. How do you get the best possible harvest when the local conditions are basically a giant question mark?
You know, it really boils down to two key decisions. First, which type of seed should you plant? And second, when exactly do you put that seed in the ground? These two things have a direct, and I mean direct, impact on how much a farmer can grow, and of course, their bottom line.
And that, right there, brings us to the science. To solve this problem for the farmers in Maranhão, a team of researchers designed a really straightforward but super powerful experiment. And their goal? Simple. Put different planting times to the test and find a clear, data-driven answer.
Okay, quick sidebar. We're going to be using a word a lot, cultivar. All it means is a specific type of plant that's been developed for certain desirable traits, like, say, a higher yield. Just think of it as a unique breed of soybean. Simple as that.
So how'd they actually do this? Well, the researchers picked 40 different soybean cultivars. Then they divided a field into two parts. They planted all 40 types at one time. Then, a few weeks later, they planted those same 40 cultivars again in the second section. After that, all they had to do was measure everything and compare the results. It's a beautifully simple design.
And these are the two dates at the very heart of this thing. The first planting or sowing time was November 10th. The second was just a few weeks later, on December 2nd. The entire experiment really hangs on the difference between these two specific days.
All right, so after all that careful work, the planting, the growing, the measuring, did the sowing time actually make a difference? Let's unpack what they found. This is the big question, isn't it? Did the earlier planting in November or the later one in December deliver a better harvest? What do you think happened?
And the results are fascinating. For about 20% of the cultivars, the timing didn't really matter. But look at the rest. While 35% did better when they were planted early in November, get this, a whopping 45%, almost half, produced way higher yields when they were planted later in early December.
So the conclusion from the study was crystal clear. For most of the soybean varieties they tested, planting at the beginning of December led to better overall performance. Just waiting those few extra weeks really paid off. So what's going on here? Well, it's likely all about hitting that climatic sweet spot. You know, aligning the plant's most critical growth stages with the region's best rainfall and temperature patterns.
Okay, so let's dig into what better performance actually means. The researchers measured everything, and they found that the crops planted in December grew into taller, stronger plants. And this isn't just for show. Taller plants can soak up more sunlight, which is basically the fuel for a better harvest.
But it wasn't just about the height. All that extra fuel and better timing translated directly into the yield engine of the plant. The later sown crops also developed a greater number of pods, and more pods, of course, means more potential soybeans.
And here's the third piece of the puzzle. The soybeans themselves were actually heavier. The researchers measured what's called a higher 1,000-grain mass, which is a key sign of both yield and quality. So you put it all together. Taller plants with more pods containing heavier beans, that's the recipe for a fantastic harvest.
Now, big picture findings are great, but what makes this study so incredibly powerful is that it gives farmers specific, actionable advice. After figuring out what worked better, the next step was to pinpoint which seeds were the champions. This gives local farmers a precise playbook for success.
So let's say you're a farmer and you have to plant early, in that November window. Well, the study identified these 5 top-performing cultivars.
Think of them as the champions for an early start, the ones that will give you the best possible yield if you plan early.
But if you can wait for that sweet spot in early December, here are your superstars. These 6 cultivars were the absolute best performers in the entire experiment, and it just goes to show the right seed at the right time makes all the difference.
Okay, so we've been deep in the weeds on one experiment in one part of Brazil. But why should you care? Let's zoom out and really look at the big picture here.
You know, the researchers themselves put it perfectly in their paper. They said that figuring out the ideal sowing time is among the most critical management strategies for success. It's not some minor detail. It's absolutely fundamental to getting farming right.
And that is the key takeaway here. This kind of research isn't just some academic exercise. It's about generating super local, super precise data that helps farmers adapt to their own specific environment. By making each farm more efficient, we end up strengthening our entire global food supply. It's that important.
And this all leaves us with one final, really important question to think about. As our world population keeps growing and farming expands into new, untested places, could this kind of focused, local science be the real key to sustainably feeding our future? It's a powerful thought to end on.